Okay, so I think a good place to start is just to briefly mention why we're having this meeting, just to provide some
Mm-hmm.
context. So,
Yes.
so yeah, you reached out to me on Twitter, and you mentioned you were
Yes.
part of the adoption amplifier, and you did the claim on the Bitcoin airdrop or whatever they call it. So let's start there. Well, tell me a little bit about how you got involved in the beginning and what your expectations were.
Well, I was fairly new to crypto, 2 to 3 years ago, and a friend, well, I held some Bitcoin, and a friend mentioned Hex and said we could get free Hex for holding Bitcoin. So, understandably, I was a little bit suspicious. I was thinking, how does this work? What's going to happen when I put in my Bitcoin address? I'm not very tech savvy, so I didn't know if my Bitcoin is going to get stolen from my wallet. And I looked up Hex online, and Google um, has some sort of a when you look up a name, it just gives you other options. So clearly, people have searched is Hex a scam, and that came up. Um, and I sort of decided not to really believe one or the other. But anyway, free claim my free Hex through Bitcoin, and yeah, I decided to just put in a tiny bit of money and to see what happens. And I sort of didn't really have any expectation. I thought if I lose this, I'm okay with that. And I just happened to sort of claim at a time when you could get sort of most hex for your ETH. It was the second sort of second largest day in terms of how much money I could get for one. So that was just quite just lucky. And yeah, I've just kept most of the hex since then. Just staked it and kept it.
Okay, so what you described, was that the adoption amplifier that you got lucky with?
That's right. It just happened that I sort of exchanged the ETH at a time when one ETH could get me 1.5 million hex or something like that. So um, yeah, it just seemed like it was just a number on a page, really. And since then, I did buy a little bit more when the price went up, um, but not a huge amount.
Okay, and you staked those immediately.
Yeah, staked it all for about a year, and after a year, I sold a little bit and put in some other coins, and I then yeah restaked for another year because I thought, well, we'll just see what happens. It was a little bit of sort of luck of a draw.
So let's have a look here. I'm just glancing at your comments again in the chat here to refresh my memory. You
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned that you would have a unique, or a balanced perspective. So
Yes.
let's try to understand that, because my interviews to date have been very polarizing. So I'd be curious. But before you
Okay.
before you go down that road, though, are you currently still holding Hex? Or have you completely exited now?
And I still hold my hex, and I don't intend on selling any sort of initial what I bought initially anytime soon. Or I guess I would just sell rewards from time to time. Um, so yeah, I guess I am quite aware at the very polarized um, perception of hex and polarized community. Um, and people either love hex or hate hex, or they'll either love Richard or hate Richard. And I think there's a little bit of both. One can one can see some good things in Hex, and also there's room to see some issues where there are issues. I mean, I tend to approach my life like that. So, I imagine that you would have a lot of either sort of Hex lovers or Hex haters, and I thought at least maybe I can offer you a little bit of a neutral, a bit more balanced perspective on the whole situation.
Yeah, that's much appreciated. And as you say in your message, you have a doctorate in psychology, so I think this will be applicable in this study, if you like, because I am attempting to see both sides of the coin, but honestly, that conversation has been had at length by multiple parties over the years,
Yeah.
and it's not really worth repeating, in my opinion. That's what
Yes.
I've come to understand. So I am hoping to get this third perspective or fourth from, you know, currently I'm looking at I'm trying to connect with game theory experts, economists and what have you, but I think
Mm-hmm.
psychologists would also be applicable, especially when depending on the field that you specialized in. um, there's some
Well,
interesting community dynamics going on here.
yeah. I mean, in terms of game theory, I think Richard's done a very good job at looking at sort of what are the mechanisms of behavior change. And, he's looked at sort of what positive reinforcement does, and it does encourage certain behavior. So holding on to coins. And he's looked at what sort of punishment does, and punishment being, when something gets taken away from you. So when you if you exit a stake early, um, and if you exit it before you complete 50% of the stake length, some of the coins get taken away, some of the principal gets taken away. So I think from a from that point of view, it's a very well done framework. It also delays gratification. So it does encourage people to just hold on to coins, because he has sort of worked out, and I think other people have also worked out, that those who accumulate, buy coins and hold on to them, that they tend to do a little bit perhaps better long term than people who trade. And this is, I'm not a sort of trader or finance person, so I wouldn't be able to quote any stats on this, but I do believe that to be the case. And so I think, clearly that's well thought out. And I think, Richard's smart enough to put together like a range of sort of theoretical frameworks. And I think, I don't know, I read somewhere that he even consulted some like Ponzi scheme people. Now I don't know if this is true or not, but he's sort of looking outside the box and putting things together to be able to create something quite nice. Something that might work. And certainly, his there's something about his personality that's been able to create quite a following, if you like. Where people just believe what he says. They follow the rules that he suggests they should follow, or whatever he likes, they like. And there's something about all of that. And on the other hand, there is this quite a polarized community, where people are put into good and bad, and there's infighting, there's censorship, and not this doesn't only happen to Hex community. A lot of other crypto communities are rather interesting, but it's quite rife in Hex. So that's the other side of the coin, pardon the pun.
Richard has often been called an exceptional marketer, and I wonder there is conversation around the staker class, and then just the hex class, I guess. So there is this divisiveness baked into the design as well, right?
So what do you mean? And when you say between stake and hex class?
Well, I've understood that if you're staking, like there are certain categories, or how might you say it, levels. So the 5555
Oh
people,
yes.
and then there's the just regular stakers. Then there's a lot of categorization in the community,
Yeah.
even though they often say they're united and that they are all in it together and yada yada yada. There seems to be this baked-in division that causes these kind of controversies almost organically. It seems.
Yeah. Uh, Look, there is, I suppose, part of the that some of it is part of the game theory. It is sort of staking long and being in the 5555 club and um, having these sea animals that people sort of which category they belong to, whether they're a whale or a dolphin, shrimp, or whatever. So that all puts people into certain categories. Now, I think these things are. I think they can. A lot of these things can be widespread. I think in crypto communities as well. Um, and there can be infighting between different groups, and I've certainly seen it in other Telegram groups. So it's not unique to Hex, but I think the extent that it happens, the sort of the level of censorship that goes on, and the level of banning of people from certain chat rooms if they have genuine questions of concern. I think that's a bit unusual. Um, so I don't have an answer for you why that happens. I mean, we could speculate, but um, yeah, is that sort of what you're thinking about, or?
Honestly, I'm trying to keep an open mind, but I think what Richard has created um, does very likely what it says on the tin. So I think this is why so many people are very happy about it. But the thing that keeps coming up, obviously, is what is Richard's real role, and also coming back to the class structure, there are
Yeah.
god whales.
Yes.
Now, I think it was Johnny Chaos, who's a prominent figure in the community, mentioned that there were 12 of them. So I start to see this structure emerge where, typical kind of corporate hierarchy even. And I
Mm.
wonder if that's what's rubbing people up the wrong way, because he talks a lot about transparency and decentralization and what have you, and some of these other core values of crypto, but it's hard to prove that those values are being upheld. And I mean,
Yeah.
Hex is not the only project to do such things. So
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean the whole notion of whales is really again very prominent in cryptocurrency groups, and I've certainly seen it in other coins. It's just in the other coins, people don't really talk about it. They don't really advertise it. Um, Mind you, I hold another coin. It's a privacy coin, so certainly people are very private about that sort of stuff. But um, yeah, there isn't so much. Um, I guess there isn't so much structure around who belongs to which group. And in Hex, people are. in one group or in the other group, and they're either, there's this sort of mentality: you're either with us or you're against us. You're an OG or you're a new person. um, and I think, look, I've just been thinking a little bit about this, and I guess a lot of these OGs and the sort of people originally claimed Hex, which I suppose I would fall into that category, even though I don't really identify myself as one. Um, a lot of people might be concerned about, or they might be anxious about the coin being devalued by some new people who are coming in. And in a way, they might rely on the new money, inflow of money, for the coin or for the value to go up. But yet at the same time, there is some anxiety about new people. And I think some of the new people might equally feel worried about, is their money just going to be taken, and is the coin going to be, rug pulled? And are all these whales going to enrich themselves on behalf of someone else who comes in a bit later? So I think that seems to be, for me, one of the sort of key issues that doesn't seem so well recognized by anybody. It's not really well spoken about, and I suppose these two groups don't often even communicate with each other. So that again, it's not unique to Hex. This happens in all different groups. When new people come in, within a group, it can threaten somebody who's been there in the group for some time. But again, I just think the sort of the real, like, the fighting that you see, and I don't know if you've spent time in the Telegram channels much. Yeah, I think you should pay it a visit, actually.
No, I find it extremely exhausting, to be honest.
I'm sure, yeah.
Twitter is enough of an exhaustion, but I think Telegram is like concentrated even further. But I understand where you're coming from. I will certainly look in there a bit more often.
Look, I'll give you an example of something to take a look at. There is a Telegram group called Hex Wrecked Plebs. And somebody opened a Telegram group at some point, and essentially random people in the community send messages from other channels into that group. If somebody has said either something negative about Hex, or if somebody has said, I'm really stressed out, the coin's gone down, or something like that. That's a sort of, it's very teenage girl mentality. So yeah, I don't blame you not really wanting to get too immersed.
Yeah, I'm trying to avoid. I think it's too easy to get sucked into that conversation, and it's kind of dull. I'm trying, like, what I believe. I mean, this is an ongoing investigation, so there's plenty of room for discovery, and the things that I've discovered about Hex and the industry, generally speaking, is much more interesting. So, but I will check out Hex Wrecked Plebs on Telegram.
But look, that's just one example. But I suppose, I guess what I'm wanting to more so communicate is that the anxieties exist on both sides for people, and that's where some of the divisions occur. And that it's like I said, it's quite a normal part of human behavior, but there's some sort of extra level of intensity within Hex for some reason.
And would you care to speculate how that's being created, that extra level of anxiety?
Look, I can speculate more broadly, but I imagine that leadership has a big role to play. And I'm just more speaking broadly. when you look at this sort of kind of within group behavior. Yeah, so that's just more theoretical kind of speculation.
Yeah, okay. And repeatedly, obviously, Richard has claimed to not be the leader. He calls himself a cheerleader. And yet, if you watch any of his live streams, he constantly kind of sends orders out into the community. Most recently in Copenhagen, I was listening to something he was saying. Basically, he was like telling everyone to run ads. Just go and run ads.
Oh, really?
Everything
Okay.
everything was geared towards go out there, troops, and find me more Hexicans.
Look, I think you've probably seen more of that material than I have. Um, I think he is a leader. I think that the community takes a lot of cue from him. That's what I've noticed.
Absolutely.
And he takes cue from the community. And there was some comments made some time ago about people liking to see his watches and all the, Louis Vuitton clothes that he buys, and he just bought more and more. So I think it goes in two directions. But again, no one is immune from wanting to be recognized. I think whenever somebody gets some positive attention, they're more likely to continue displaying that behavior. So that's quite, again, it's quite normal.
Absolutely, and he has been brandished as sociopath by many of his haters out there, and one of his reasonings for wearing Louis Vuitton bags and having lots of bling, if you like, in his latest videos is that he's attempting to attract high net worth individuals to the project.
Mm-hmm.
This is his reasoning from his own mouth. So
Yeah.
now, because obviously a lot of people were off put by this sudden, well, somewhat sudden pivot towards brandishing luxury baggage on his videos.
Yeah.
Seemed kind of untoward. And also, often many people mention the fact that he's not in it for the money. He's in it for the glory, the respect,
Yeah.
etc., etc. And I wonder, and I think actually I posted a question or I commented somewhere recently regarding that. What happens when he reaches that level of king of his community, which
Yeah.
arguably he already had?
Well, look, I'm just sort of thinking about the whole thing of sociopath. Um, Look, it'd be very hard for me to comment on that because clearly I don't know him and haven't investigated him. But I think people can very quickly throw those kinds of comments without really knowing what they mean. And especially when they don't like somebody. And I think people who are sociopaths are, it's a specific small group of population who do some very nasty things and who don't have remorse and who don't have a great deal of feeling. So I wouldn't say, he doesn't come across like somebody who doesn't feel. That's basically what I'm going to say about that. And look, I think his end goal is recognition and glory. I mean, he said it himself. I think he's been quite transparent about that. And the question is whether he can ever really reach that I don't know, status or that feeling, because the feeling has to come from within and not based on something that somebody achieves on the outside. And so then, how far can somebody like that go? When will enough be enough? And this is again with I'm just talking a bit more broadly about when you look at theoretically somebody who does need recognition, they will probably continue to work very hard to get it because the feeling doesn't come from creating wealth. It comes from a different place.
No, it makes perfect sense actually. And the thing with Pulse Chain coming out the end of the year, I think it's going to. I don't. Have you been following that development?
A little bit. To be honest with you, I'm not too immersed within the whole sort of the development side of things or even the community, but I do follow it a little bit from the outside, if you like. But yeah, I know that's going to be coming up at some stage, probably probably early next year that it's going to there's going to be the fork happening.
As an observer from outside, as you say, what do you think? If we just imagine for a moment that Richard isn't there, the community isn't really as big as it is. What do you think would attract newcomers if those components weren't in existence?
Well, I think the product speaks for itself because it does have such good game theory embedded in, and it's been programmed for this cost of shares to go up over time, and it's been made in such a way that the price is going to continue to go up. So I think that's enough in my point of view. It's enough for people to want to invest in it, especially with inflation, going high everywhere around the world. Hex still does give quite a good return, even if people don't stake too long. So I think, yeah, I think his design is something very worthwhile.
So so you think that the product would be successful regardless of Richard and the many thousands of community members that are onboarding newcomers?
Yeah. I think what's happening with Richard with advertising, it's just sort of it's like adding a bit of engine, a little bit of fuel to the engine. I mean, it's just going a bit faster than it would happen otherwise. There are other coins out there that are quite similar. Um, they're doing okay. They're not nearly doing as well as Hex, but I think the cryptocurrency itself has been really well done, and it's quite flawless in a way. So I think it would do really well.
Okay. And that's interesting because when we talk about the product, what we're talking about really is the smart contract and
Yes.
how it was designed. Now, you're obviously, I imagine you're familiar with the origin address and the various god whales and what have you that can interact with this product in ways that many people can't.
Yeah.
So some would suggest there's an unfair advantage to certain participants in this perfect product, if you like.
Yeah.
So if you could talk a little bit on that.
So my thinking is again, it's to have whales is not unique to Hex. And what whales can do is just if they hold other coins, they can make the price go up by selling those other coins in and buying Hex for them, or they can crash the price. They can sort of manipulate the price. But again, that happens with Bitcoin. It happens with all coins. When people get in really early, and if they put in quite a lot of money, they have enough of the coin to be able to do this. So again, from that perspective, that doesn't really worry me so much. And the origin address, again, I need to be really careful not to sort of echo what other people say, but people talk about it as being this benevolent kind of entity. And I mean, I don't think anything behind Origin's dress is intentional. Um, my gut feeling is that it's there to be able to benefit Hex. And again, I sort of I trust what Richard says about this. I think he's been quite open about it in some way. Um, yeah, but I really think if you take the community out and if you take Richard out, I think the product still does very well. Now, I could be wrong, but that's just my feeling now.
I think a lot of the arguments on the opposition side are orbit around the OA, and Richard will say, it's nothing to do with me. And that seems to be for regulatory reasons that he doesn't want to. He doesn't want it to be considered a security,
Yeah.
which is fair enough. And then, but on the other hand, a lot of the community defend him by saying, he's not like an anonymous founder. He hasn't launched a product and disappeared into the shadows like Satoshi. He's here. He's out here standing in public, getting behind his product, etc., etc. Like often they
Mm.
make the comparison with Bezos or Elon or whatever, which is for me is a little bit of apples and oranges. But so there's the often I'm seeing this kind of conflict, this hypocrisy in the statements, or this lack of unity and I guess this is typical of a distributed community across the world, and also, who gets what information at what time.
Mm.
Some parties privy to information before others? I don't know. But there seems to be a lot of hypocrisy in how this product is described by both its non-leadership and the community. There's a discrepancy there, don't you think?
Look, I was my thoughts are that it has something to do with lack of trust and sort of uncertainties and anxieties that come from all sides. Um, and I, I tend to I tend to think, what's the, why are people, I am wondering why people are so worried about the OA myself. Um, and maybe some people worry that Richard might do a rug pull. I find it very hard to believe because, with this documentary and the other documentary that's being done, um, the, people are going to recognize his face. And it doesn't seem like the guy who would do a rug pull. Um, to me, he seems to like the idea of holding, if OA belongs to him, it's sort of holding huge amount of money. And he said himself in one of the interviews, it's just a numbers game to him. So to be able to say, look, I'm the richest man alive, I think that probably is more appealing to him than actually cashing out. He can literally not spend that money. But that's part of the issue with this division within the groups, is that everyone is trying to protect their own sort of land, um, or piece of the pie, and everyone's become mistrusting of everyone else. And I find that a bit troubling. And again, I don't know why it happens. I haven't really sunk my teeth sort of enough into the community to work it out. But just from what I've seen, you know, yeah, different parties are all untrusting. So whether they've made a lot of money suddenly and they're worried that that's going to get taken away, whether it has something to do with sort of pre-existing ways of relating to people, I really don't know. It could be all sorts of reasons why it happens. But it doesn't mean that the OA is going to do a rug pull. I just can't. I can't see that happening myself. But again, I could be proven wrong, and I would accept that I'm wrong if it does happen.
It's interesting. We often talk about rug pull like as if it was an ultimate event,
Yeah.
but you know, in reality, it's probably more like a drip, if you like. So
Yeah.
it's not like a sudden rug pull. It's more like the rug is being pulled already, and it's just in slow motion, and
Yeah.
it's harder to detect that way.
Sure. Well, the thing that's so interesting about the community is they're actually watching everyone's wallets, and the OA wallet, if anything moved out of it, um, to to be sold, that would be visible to people, so people would know that. And look, I I imagine if the OA started to sell, that it would create a lot of anxiety, and the price would just plummet very quickly. So then there would be no benefit to the OA, because it wouldn't be able to sell out. So that's what I'm thinking. Again, could be proven wrong, and if I do, I need to accept that I'm not right. But that, um, I, you know, I yeah, that's probably all I can really think about. I can't think about anything sort of more meaningful on that one.
Yeah, no, the OA address and a number of other addresses have come to my attention already, and
Yeah.
I'm still yet to follow back to how that origin address came to be publicized initially. So
Okay.
it's possible that whomever whatever wallets people are watching are not the correct ones. I don't know. It's something I still need to look into.
Okay. Yeah.
And
And look, I,
specifically, sorry.
I was just going to say, I don't really sort of, because I'm not tech savvy, I don't do any of that stuff, and I know very little about that stuff, and I'm sort of haven't been very interested in, you know, keeping track of people's wallets myself. So again, that's probably why I don't really have a great deal of sort of intellectual information or I can't really comment in an intelligent way.
That's okay. You're not the first person I've spoken to who's not tech savvy. So it seems to be
Okay.
a trend amongst especially newer crypto
Yeah.
people, and Hex being typically their first entry point into the space.
Yes.
When it comes to the scam, it's been all Richard and the project itself has repeatedly been called a scam. Now, as far as my investigation has taken me so far, I believe that the decentralization or lack of decentralization is what causes a project to be titled or called a scam, specific to crypto. But when we talk more broadly about scams in the regular economy, what are some sort of psychological triggers or mechanisms that scam artists use on people that we can perhaps learn from in the crypto economy?
um, well, I'm certainly not a scam expert, so but I guess one of the things that scam artists might do is um, make grand promises that might sound too good to be true, um, and um, look, I have very very little experience in this particular part of the field, but um,
We can expand into an area where you have more experience if you feel more comfortable.
um,
Like as a psychologist, surely there must be some elements of this project that are more interesting for you to observe than others.
Yeah, I think for me, it has been this sort of group dynamic that's been interesting, and thinking about why it is like that, and is there a middle ground? Um, and being able to sort of look at the sort of cult-ish behavior of the group and think about what is going on there, and is this, what goodness is there in the project that's real, and what goodness is imagined, and the sort of fantasy around, um, what I guess, what's maybe the fantasy around what's possible, or what is being done when something else might be done in reality. Um, and I think people have lost their own sense of self. There's this group think that's developing, or that has developed. And I just find it a bit interesting. Again, it's not unique to this group, but it's just there is a very strong flavor of that. And a lot of people joke that it's a cult, but I think there is something quite cultish about it. Um, so that's what I've been sort of observing and taking notice of. Um, and yeah, I'm in terms of sort of a scam, I'm just sort of thinking about your question. With people who people might some people might scam deliberately. Some people might just be very good at reading other people and know how to work the crowd. Um, and some people might be very unwell, and they make others believe what they believe. And you get this sort of extreme kind of cult situation where somebody, might be a bit psychotic, and they have some grand sort of ideas about who they are. And other people who are equally vulnerable might follow them and get themselves into a lot of trouble. Now, I don't think anything like that is happening here. Um, I think there are some very clever sort of marketing techniques that are being used, which in itself I think is not a crime. Marketing is being used on all of us every day, and Facebook has been caught out doing some not very nice things, wanting to market to kids. But so I think we've got to just keep a quite broad perspective, and make sure that something that doesn't get fully labeled as bad, where it could just be what some people do to try and create something, or to try and, whether they create a community or try and market their product. And I think, for example, in this instance, Richard is very good at marketing. So I think people think of it as scam, but I think it's something else. So yeah, that's sort of my comment on that.
Okay. So, final question. Do you believe, or do you assume that Richard's going to do a repeat of Hex with Pulse?
Well, I am I probably would say I hope so. Um, and I think he might. He's been very successful with Hex, and um, he may very well choose to use a similar method at Pulse.